Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. She is Alex Winley. I am Ian Heston. The preseason moves on step by step. We get closer to that February 25th date. Inter Miami will open up the season at Drive Pink Stadium against CF Montreal. And, they have been welcoming, Alex, their first opponents to Drive Pink Stadium or to South Florida this week. Montreal training alongside the Columbus Crew at the training facility with Inter Miami. We expect for some scrimmages to be happening throughout the week. On Saturday, Inter Miami will take on the Crew in one of those scrimmages. They'll play both teams over the next 10 days or so. But really, as we were there over the past week or so, talking with people as they returned from Sarasota, a great opportunity for them to have some bonding. And I want to start there because we're going to get to some of the final roster moves in just a sec. But I thought that this trip to Sarasota was really beneficial for them from a team chemistry standpoint. Let's just start there, Alex, because this is a unique situation here in South Florida. They get to train at home. They get to have all preseason in their beds. They get to go home to their families every single night, whereas, Montreal's down here, right? Columbus is down here. And they're not being able to get. St. Louis is now in Los Angeles right now, right? So a lot of the other teams, or a lot of the cold weather teams, aren't able to do that. And we were talking with I was talking with Chris McVeigh earlier this week, and he had mentioned how it was good for the team to be able to come together and have that time where it was just them for 4 or 5 days, especially being a team that does return so much. It allowed a lot of the new guys to really become part of La Familia, as we all like to say. So let's just start there with the benefit of the Sarasota trip, what you think it might be, and now that we're coming back, getting these games and how it might benefit the second half of the preseason.
Yeah, it'll benefit them a lot, compared to last off season, where they basically shipped out off half the team. Now they have a bit of a core now, and so the newer guys like Negri and Stefanelli and Kristoff, they can come in and integrate quite seamlessly. That Sarasota trip was huge because it's just more team chemistry, and like you said, a lot of these MLS teams, they're coming from out of state, but Miami, they're able to sleep in their own beds, have their family. Even they didn't even leave the state of Florida. They went up to Sarasota, which is a 4 or 5 hour, maybe a little bit less, drive up there. So yeah, great team bonding. I saw on Instagram Robbie Robinson, McVeigh, and Negri sitting together during a team dinner or something. So it's guys like that. And Joseph Martinez as well. They're integrating them all of the new players quite nicely, and it'll only help them on the field. When they know their tendencies off the field. On the field, the chemistry, it just makes it a little bit quicker to get used to each other.
You mentioned that it's still in state and how important that is because you're able to go. I think they were at IMG. They didn't actually specifically announce it, but from talking with the guys and how they framed it and described the fields there, it sounded like it was IMG from my times being up there. But the idea of still being in Florida, you look, New York is 30 degrees colder today and we're in early February. It's 80 degrees here as they're training. Boston is 40 degrees colder. Chicago is 40 degrees colder. And for, a team like Montreal that has to come down here and play game one in a similar climate, this is beneficial for them to be able to get down here and get used to it. But Miami does have this inherent advantage that it's always like this down here. And Phil has talked a lot about it last year in that being the home field advantage that Inter Miami took advantage of so much last year. And it's going to come time when we're going to start really looking to 2023, but we can do it still within the lens of 2022. And the fact that there was such a slow start that I will argue continually was the reason behind them not getting the home playoff win. That terrible start to the year is probably what stopped them from getting that home playoff win. And what really helped them get into the playoffs was that home run in the dog days of summer when the Heat really ramped up for other teams, and Miami was pulling out all those late games time and time again. That getting this camaraderie from day one, from the outset, whereas other teams like Montreal, like Columbus, are having to find different ways to adapt and different ways to bring on the heat. Really, there's no other way to say it. That this could be a way to mitigate what the challenge to start the year was last year. Because don't forget, after Montreal, the second week of the year is Philadelphia Union. The third week of the year is at New York City. That's the top three teams in the Eastern Conference from 2022 in weeks 1, 2, and 3. That's a heck of a start that they're going to have to get.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, to your point, I will say that all of the games are at like 7:30 this year, so I don't think that the Heat will play as big of a deal like it did last year compared to those 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock games. But still, there is humidity at nighttime. Excuse me, down here, and it'll affect the other teams. And like you said, the heart attack Herons, them. Them coming back to time and time again, getting those late 3 points. It's one of the reasons why they were able to push for the playoffs. And like you said, the first 5 games of last season, excuse me, the first 5 games of last season, that 5-0, losing streak. That's probably one of the reasons why they weren't able to get a home playoff spot. This season it may be a little different. If you guys read The Athletic, they MLS is weighing up whether or not to change the playoff system. So the top 9 teams get in, and the 8th and 9th seed will play in at like a play-in round. And yeah, I don't know. We can discuss that at a later date, but still, Miami, they want to not finish. They don't want to finish in a spot where they're going to have to play into the playoffs. They want to finish, top 4, top 5 in the East. So, yeah, it's important to get that chemistry down, and that trip to Sarasota was so important for them for that. And like you said, they're going to be playing CF Montreal, which is their first opponent of the season. Columbus Crew, which obviously they take on later in the year. Those first 2 games are going to be difficult, but if they can get a win against Montreal at home, Philadelphia is going to be very difficult. But if Miami lose, I don't think anyone will necessarily blame them. But it's imperative that they get off on the right foot this season with the amount of competitions that they're in and them wanting to finish top 4 in the East. It's going to be important for them to start on the right foot and continue that form until the summer break. And I believe there's like a break between like June or what is it, May or June for the Leagues Cup. So they'll have a couple weeks off to regroup. So they just got to get through those first couple months of the year, get the summer, and then maybe retool with that open DP spot, which we'll touch on later, and see how that goes.
Well, let's touch on it because the news, heading out, as we talked about, you mentioned, and I did as well, Alejandro Pozuelo is heading to Turkey. And first and foremost, our thoughts and prayers to the people of Turkey. Absolutely devastating, in Syria, just an absolutely devastating earthquake that has struck the region. And obviously our hearts and prayers go out to them. Alejandro Pozuelo is on his way to play for Konyaspor in the Turkey Turkey Super League is what they call it. And so, yeah, so the Alejandro Pozuelo era in Miami, short-lived, about a half season, unable to come to an agreement on the contract. I got to admit, I know that a lot of La Familia, a lot of the fans obviously upset. He was a fan favorite last year. You can make the case that he was the reason that they made the playoffs last year, and you wouldn't hear an argument from me. So a tremendous addition, what Chris Henderson was able to do and bring him in late in this, in that secondary window and really be that push to help Gonzalo and make that run into the playoffs last year. He leaves now after not coming to an agreement. The team did want to make it work. They were active with him for a very long time. Let's not forget they're still under the sanctions. That affects how much allocation money they have, which, you can say, okay, well, that doesn't affect the actual contract. It does when you have to buy Gregory down. You have to use that money in other places to be able to make things work within the salary cap. If you want to use that allocation money to lower your cap number, that then affects the amount that you can give to a single player. So even if you make him a designated player, you still need to account for that $612,500 that would have immediately been a cap hit that there's no way you can mark that down. Like, that is a number that is firm. Everything above that doesn't go towards the cap, but it's not like you can say, oh, well, it's 612 now. we can buy that down with allocation money. No, that number is a steady cap hit that there's nothing you can do about. So unfortunately, when talking about a designated player, it didn't really work in terms of the contract for Alejandro Pozuelo. So we wish him well in Turkey as he heads out there. Alex, just your thoughts before we get into how this affects the roster and how it could affect it mid-season as well. Just Alejandro Pozuelo, what he meant for that second half of the year and unable to come to an agreement on a contract.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The club did want to bring him back. It wasn't like they let him walk for any inexplicable reason. Like I've been seeing on social media a lot of the fans saying that, oh, Miami, there's a reason, they let him walk on a free. No, they actively tried to bring him back. They want to keep that DP spot open for, like Ian said, obvious reasons in the summer, just in case. And if they would have made it, if they could have made it work, they would have made it work. That's simple as that. But unfortunately, they couldn't, and that's part of the reason why they brought in Nicolas Stefanelli to be that stopgap or be that number 10 that they can rely on. It's unfortunate. A lot of MLS rules, they say that you have to stay within the cap, and there's they tried to bring him back, but they just couldn't make it work financially. And it's like I said, it's not like they let him walk or anything. It's just like they couldn't make it happen. And if they could have, they would have. And also I've seen people say, well, if they would have just bought out Pizarro and given Pozuelo that spot. I know, Ian, there's some reason why they can't quite do that either. They could have bought out Pizarro, but Pizarro is on his last year of his contract, and it just wouldn't make economic sense for them to buy out a player on his last year, spend extra money, which I mean, I guess they can do, but they're also running a business. They want some return on that $12 million investment they made on Pizarro. So that's why they had him up for sale. They could just buy him out, but that just wouldn't make economic sense for Inter Miami.
Yeah, let's just clarify that a little, because even if you buy him out and he's no longer, even if you open up that spot, there is still a cap hit that you'd ensue. So it's not a free ability to do it. Let's not forget, Matuidi was still on the books up until December 1st of 2022. So even if you buy him out to open up the extra spot and say, oh, well, we want to, you're still taking a financial hit there. So I don't think that it's 100% correct for people to say, oh, just buy him out and take that money and put it to Pozuelo. You can't just for it like that. That you do incur some penalty for doing that. That also, to be said, would be financially silly to, like you said, a guy in the last year of his deal. Yeah, I mean, it would have been probably the best move, I think, if they could have moved Pizarro, which, that would, and, they talked with Liga MX teams. He had an option to buy with Monterrey. They didn't take it. So, you're bound by the contracts that you, and some moves are home runs. Some moves are, an infield single, and some, to not to mix my sports metaphors, but, I think that they're just in a situation with Pizarro where this is his, he's in the last year of his deal. And I don't think that, I thought for a long time one thing happened with the other, but I thought that included moving Pizarro. So if Pizarro's not moving, then one doesn't necessarily go the same way. Let's look at how the roster, though, is now affected by this, because with Pozuelo leaving, you mentioned there is only 2 designated spots. Joseph will not take up a designated spot, as Atlanta is taking up a large portion of his salary. Gregory will be bought down with allocation money, so his salary, while above the $612,000 threshold, it can easily be lowered to about $200,000, a little less than $200,000 in allocation money that can go to him. So that leaves Pizarro in the last year of his deal, and Campana as a young designated player who is in the first year of his new deal that he signed as a young designated player with the U22 distinction. So with all that in mind, they still do have 1 designated player spot, and they'll probably hold that carrying into the start of the year. That's not to say that they will not have that spot filled by the end of the year. We saw that with Pozuelo last year, where he came in as a designated player, and that's only because they had 1 open spot. and that spot was because Pizarro was on loan to Monterrey, right? So the jigsaw puzzle sort of comes together here.
Yeah.
So they do have that spot. It is prorated if you do it in the July transfer window. So it wouldn't be the $612 number. So let's just throw out a player. We'll call him Leonardo Muschetti. If they signed Leonardo Muschetti in July, then he would go count for half the designated player spot, but they could still pay him however much they wanted. So when we're talking for cap measurement purposes, that would only occur for the 300 and, do your math, $1,000 towards the cap, and then he can make whatever he wants for the remainder of the year. We've seen this happen several times with European transfers into MLS that come after the European season and into July. So they do have the ability to do that. There is a financial incentive a little bit in the U22 realm to carry a third designated player. We'd really get in the weeds on it if I started breaking that down. Also, with the loan of Emerson, it doesn't necessarily make much sense. Emerson would have fallen into that category. So with him on loan, you can really just ride this wave for the end of the year. And then next year, you can reap all the benefits, especially when you don't have any of the sanctions anymore. That is a long way to say that there is a clear vision and plan for what they're doing. And that's nice to see. It gets very complicated. And if you're still with me after that long rant, I applaud you. But they have two designated players now. They'll have two designated players to start the year, it looks like, and then they have some flexibility mid-year.
Yeah,
you still with me, Alex?
Yeah, I am actually. I want to add on to this. There were reports, an article out this morning, or just statements from Barca's president. I think Joan Laporte. I don't know if he's a president or CEO or whatever, but I know this is. I know people are probably tired of the rumors, but this is regarding Sergio Busquets, and Laporta did say that Busquets does want to come to America, and I did read something this morning from I don't know, one of their higher ups, where they basically said that he was, there was an option for him to move in January, but he could come in the summer, and there's also an option for him to extend his contract for another 6 more months, so he would arrive in January of 2024 instead of the summer of this season, which in my opinion, I think that would be more cap friendly for Miami, so they don't have to squeeze him in, and Leonardo Muschetti this summer as well. So you sign Muschetti during the summer, and then next year you get Sergio Busquets in January, where Pizarro will be gone, and you'll have if they sign Busquets to a DP contract, they'll have Busquets, if he wants that. So yeah, I think I think the reason why Pozuelo wasn't re-signed is number one, it didn't make sense cap wise. Number two, they're just trying to remain flexible, and I feel like they were willing to take that chance. If they get Muschetti in the summer, letting Pozuelo go, it just didn't make sense cap wise. They couldn't buy out Pizarro because it still wouldn't make sense. And yeah, there's just a lot of moving parts to MLS cap rules, and we should do an entire podcast just on that, just so people can understand and make intelligent takes, because some of the takes are just they're not correct, and it's basically misinformation at this point. Some of the takes I'm seeing from the fans and other podcasts, it's like, come on guys, like, learn the MLS rules. I know it's difficult, but yeah, it's a lot, but it'll be.
I don't blame anybody for not knowing MLS rules. Yeah, but I don't blame, because MLS rules are tough. They are very tough. It took me, I still don't have it all, and it took me the better part of a decade, and I'm still learning them. So, it is difficult to figure out all the mechanisms. And we haven't even touched the discovery list or rights of first refusal or anything like that. Yeah, it's gotten rid of now.
Oh, so they got rid of the allocation list.
Every MLS beat writers, every MLS beat writer's annoyance, the discovery list is finally gone out of our lives mercifully. But I wanted to talk about what this means for that number 10 role and who's going to fit it, because I would naturally think that Pizarro would have, but we've seen him not all preseason. He's played that left central midfield role in the games that we've seen this preseason, and especially in the scrimmage against St. Louis, it was Coco who started and Stefanelli who came in for him. And so I guess in breaking those down, I know that you and I both like Stefanelli a lot. I would say I haven't seen enough of Coco to develop an opinion. I probably haven't seen enough of Stefanelli to develop an opinion, but he just made a very good first impression. So where do you see that? Because I would think that naturally Pizarro would be back at the 10, but perhaps his role is changing for Phil and Phil sees him in a different light.
Yeah, and I don't know about, like I said in the last pod, I don't see Coco as a 10, honestly. I feel like him being played there is a disservice to his skill set. Like, he should be one of the backup strikers to Campana or Martinez. I think he wants to get in behind and he wants to be a runner. Some guys can play in that 10 role. Stefanelli, Pizarro, maybe Bryce Duke, we haven't really mentioned, but, as an aside here, one of Miami's best played games last year, and mind you, Pozuelo wasn't on the field. They were playing the 4-3-1-2 diamond midfield. There was no Pozuelo. There was no Gregory. It was that 4-1 win against Orlando, and it was arguably one of the better played games that Miami had that season. So for people concerned about Pozuelo leaving and saying, oh, it may not work, Bryce Duke was playing as a 10 during that game, and he played really well, actually. So and imagine, maybe Bryce Duke moves on to center midfield and Stefanelli plays as that 10. Plus, you have Martinez and Campana and Gregory in a full strength team. I think, the formation will play well. So, like Bryce Duke, Stefanelli. I'm not a fan of Coco there. Maybe even Pizarro can play there. I don't think he has the defensive awareness to really get back in time. I know he can put in a tackle, but that awareness, I think he falls short there. But him being played as a kind of a 10 that doesn't have much, defensive responsibility because he'll be playing in front of 3 central midfielders that will have his back, so he can go up there and dribble to his heart's content with Campana or Martinez or Lassiter or Robbie Robinson, LaCava, Coco, whoever. Miami are pretty deep at center forward now. Even Edison Ascona can play as a 10. We saw him during the St. Louis scrimmage. He did get injured, but he looks ready to step up to get MLS minutes consistently. And so surprisingly, Miami, they're very deep in attack, I would say. Anyone can play as a 10. Pizarro, Coco, Stefanelli, Ascona, heck, Robert Taylor, if there's
I was going to say we didn't even mention Taylor.
Emergency. Yeah, because I think there was one game last season where he did play as a 10 and he did really poorly, and he was never seen there again. So that's part of the reason why. But yeah, Robert Taylor could play there, and Miami are really deep in the forward spot and as the number 10 spot. So yeah, Bryce Duke, Stefanelli, Coco, Pizarro, Ascona, anyone can play there. I like Ascona a lot. I think he's more of a pure 10 out of all of them. But I think Stefanelli is the guy that'll be that starter, and even you guys spoke to Jean Mata about how they're getting along with Stefanelli and how he's fitting in already, and maybe you can touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so spoke with Jean Mata earlier this week, and I had asked him to sort of compare. This is right when we were finding out that Pozuelo had finalized the deal in Turkey. So I had asked him because he was talking about Stefanelli and how he likes him and his movement and his aggression. I had sort of said, well, what do you see in the difference between what Pozuelo was like and what you're seeing from Stefanelli? And he had said that Stefanelli is more of an attacker. Stefanelli wants to go straight for a goal, and he can score the goal too. And he's almost like a tertiary threat that you can be, where Pozuelo was always kind of just like looking up and needed, where am I facilitating out? Am I going with the negative ball? Am I going out to my wings? Am I going up top to my strikers? Whereas Stefanelli is like, okay, I receive, I turn, I go. And that is a nice different dynamic, especially for a team that wants to be much more attacking minded this year. And they really want to bridge quickly from defense to offense. We talked about earlier in a podcast earlier this preseason about they're going to have more of the possession. That possession will come from the back, though. I don't think they'll hold the ball in that middle third as much. They'll start in the back, and then once the decision is made to go forward, it's quickly through the middle third. It's quickly to the attacking third. It's not going to be a lot of swing the ball around in the middle part of the field, attacking the defense. It's going to be let's play out the back, and once we find that weakness, let's go quickly. And that sometimes gets called the counterattacking style. I don't like to call it that because you're already in possession, you're already holding it, and that really does fit Stefanelli's game very well if they choose to say it. I do want to touch on what you had mentioned with that Orlando game because it's a great point, and also just adding on to it, that Orlando game is probably the closest that you'll see to the pure 4-4-2 diamond or the 4-3-1-2, whatever you want to call it, but now with Joseph and Campana up top. That game, if you want to look for a style of play and how Inter Miami is looking to play, even with that Campana goal, right? How did that Campana goal start at the very beginning of that game? It happened a quick turnover, ahead to Leo, and he just shot it from basically midfield. So those are the types of things that you're going to see, that quick transition, that sudden change that Inter Miami is about to do. While we're on this midfield, you had mentioned Bryce Duke. He's back at training, and that's good to hear. He was probably the last. Well, Ryan Saylor will probably be the last, but the last ones to return fully healthy into training. A very good sign. Phil continues to say that he expects everybody to be ready for the February 25th opener, which is a great sign for Inter Miami. He wanted to. He keeps joking that if everybody's healthy, his job is very difficult because he has to figure out who of these 25, 26 players are going to be the starting 11. And at a lot of times last year, it wasn't an option, right? Campana was down, so Higuain played. Higuain wasn't playing well, so Campana played. And so he hopes this year to have his job be a lot more difficult with a lot more bodies and a lot more depth that they're able to bring. Let's talk about this midfield, though, with Duke back, with, Robert Taylor, who I feel like we're sleeping on a little because he really is a great performer, great on the ball technician. With it, and somehow just kind of gets the seam lost in the discussion time and time again. You have Pizarro, you have Mota, you have Gregory. Let's start with the kind of the back three in that diamond and how you're going to put it, and then I'll give you my take on how I think that they'll solve this issue.
Yeah, rewatching that Orlando game, Robert Taylor was playing on the left side of the midfield, three with Indian and Vassilev on the right side, and he nearly got an assist. There was one instance where he John Mata played a very good line splitting pass, and mind you, John Mata was playing as the deep line playmaker of that game because Gregory was out. John Mata played a really good line splitting pass that took out like three Orlando defenders, and he got it to Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor on contact, basically had a flick on nutmeg on one of the Orlando defenders and he slipped it in through to Higuain, who nearly scored there if he would have just shot instead of doing the Higuain thing where he inexplicably just doesn't shoot even though he's in good position. They could have scored there. So it was Jean Mata to Robert Taylor. And speaking of Robert Taylor, I think he's very very good dribbler, and I think that's part of the reason why he will probably start against Montreal. I think he's just a good dribbler, and he's got the winger mindset, and he does have a really good work rate for a winger and an attacking player. So I think that's part of the reason why Neville has him there as that extra offensive threat in that midfield three that can go up and play of a sort of this Italian term called the mezzala, where it's basically a central midfielder that lines up in midfield, but he or she plays in those half spaces on the wing, and I think that's what they want Robert Taylor to do. Just line up here, but get into those wide spaces or half spaces on the wing next to Yedlin, and and kind of create from there. So yeah, Miami have options, and yeah, it's going to be difficult to pick a starting 11. I tweeted out a depth chart the other day, and either Bryce Duke or Pizarro or even Victor Ulloa, any one of them could maybe start. Should any of the starters drop form? So yeah, Neville does have a difficult job, but it's good to have a wealth of options compared to previous years where they were what's that rule called, the mercy rule or hardship the hardship rule, where they were calling up Inter Miami CF2 guys, and they were in the trenches back then, but now they have options, and then they have flexibility for the summer as well, and Inter Miami are sitting pretty solid right now, so let's see how it goes heading into the season, and worst case scenario, they can also make adjustments in the summer with Leonardo Maschetti if he does sign or Busquets, but yeah, let's see how that goes. But the midfield, I feel like it's very set now, and and they're starting to look pretty good.
Yeah, you could say that this is a good problem to have, and that's how I think that Phil and company and Chris Henderson would frame it. That having all of these options is, and to their credit, they say that that's what they want, and so having options is a good thing. I think you can also look at this and say there is no clear cut starting 11. No, there is no clear cut person that every well, there are a couple, but not a starting 11 that this is your first team starting 11. You must win a game. This is the 11 that's going to come out. I think that with this team, we could poll, 24 Inter Miami fans at what's your best 11. We might get 24 different answers because you could just mix and match it. Maybe 10 of 11 are the same, but that one extra spot's going to be different. And so that could be a good problem to have. You could also say, well, you wish that there was more clear cut of what your 11 was going to be. I think that Mota stays in that pocket in the central defensive midfield role, simply because I think that when we talk about what I mentioned before, playing out the back to quickly transition into the attacking third, he fits the mold of that best in that pocket. Whereas Gregory can win the ball back on the side and just avoid that altogether. Mota can play out the back a little bit better. And that's more of an offensive thing through defense. It's a little complicated, but it sort of makes sense to allow him into that pocket to be able to distribute ahead quicker. So I would say that I put Gregory, just naturally, he kind of likes that right side. He's a right-footed player in that regard. So if he's on the right, it's the question of who's filling that left spot. And for me, it comes down to pick your poison of Taylor, Pizarro, and Bryce Duke. And so once we get that, and let's not forget, Kramashi is still there too. So, we'll see if if he gets, some minutes, we could be talking about him in the middle of the season. So I think that when it comes to those three, it's going to be probably based on the assignment, probably based on who they're going up against. I think that we still have a lot to see from Negri to see who he's going to be comfortable with, because that's going to be a big part of the decision making in that process. Who's he going to play with there? So I think it's still a little too early, especially with Bryce Duke just getting his first action of the preseason recently. I think it's too early to say who's going to fit that role. Again, you'd like for your designated player to be on the field, especially when you only have two of them. But this is sort of the situation that they're in right now. And hopefully things improve. Then it brings you to that number 10 role, because you could argue any of those three guys, with maybe, like you had mentioned earlier, with the exception of Taylor, could also be in the 10 role. You throw Coco in there, you throw Stefanelli in there, and now you got four real guys. Even Valencia or Azcona can go up there in case of an emergency, I think. So you have the depth there. I think that the challenge that Phil is going to have is getting it right away. And that is really the litmus test of, I guess, like managerial skill and probably the pressure that he's going to face, because with so many options, if he picks the wrong option, all of a sudden, well, you wasted 60 minutes of one game. Now you're, trying to fix it for the final 30. Next game, are you going to get it right? The next game, are you going to get it right? That doubt starts to creep in. And so it really behooves him to look at the landscape and fall in and feel comfortable with the decisions that he's making. It's a large responsibility and one that he's going to have to really, really take hold of, because it's a good problem, like he says, to have, but it's also something that he's going to have to take responsibility for, as the one who ultimately decides the team sheet.
Yeah, and I think Ascona, he can get some minutes this season, and couple of that with, like you said, Kremeshki. A lot of good young talent coming through the ranks, and I know Inter Miami, they really want to get to that point where they can sell off some of their homegrown talent to European sides and whatnot. So this year, Kremeshki, Ascona, Ian Frey when he's returning and getting healthy, Felipe Valencia, and even Noah Allen. This is the year where a lot of them will make the step up, and hopefully, in a year or two, maybe one of them can go over to Europe and continue to fulfill their dreams. So, good shout.
Alex, I wanted to spend some time in the second half of this episode, if you will, to talk about some of the other Eastern Conference rivals and the moves that they've made this offseason, particularly the ones that are directly rivals of Inter Miami. We'll touch on Orlando. Let's touch on Atlanta a little too, simply because, they with Joseph and with playing them in Leagues Cup, Atlanta is going to be an interesting challenge this year. Let's start with Orlando and the moves that they've made, because a lot of MLS pundits, the national pundits, have been very high on Orlando's offseason. It has been a very busy one of the biggest. And, they have nine players that have left the club at the time. Mauricio Pereira had to come up with a new deal. He was a designated player for them last year, comes back not as a designated player, which opened up a DP spot for them. They filled it with Martin Ojeda from Godoy Cruz, who's a winger for them. That really was a nice signing that people liked. Pedro Gales comes back, but a lot of people are out the door. They had Tesho Akindele, who retired. Michel left for Portugal. Rafael Santos they're getting so he'll probably start in the left back for them. They're an interesting side if you look at what they are going to want to do. I still have questions for them in the back. Their defense to me still needs to improve, but that offense with Ojeda, with Cara, with Torres, with Pereira, that's going to be a very good offense to deal with, and one that many are seeing as a team that is probably one of the most improved in the Eastern Conference this coming year.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that, they're in the CONCACAF Champions League, so they're going to be looking to push on in multiple competitions. So obviously they needed the depth to get through that. So obviously the rivalry is still there with Miami and Orlando and all that jazz. But Orlando looked good and solid, but I do fear that they may have some trouble really gelling. I know their coach Oscar Pereira, he's very solid, but when they get rid of a lot of the players on the roster like that, and then you bring in new players, obviously it's going to take a while for them to gel. And yeah, I think that'll be the case with them. They'll maybe start off a little bit slow, but they'll eventually get it together, I feel.
Yeah, if there is a weakness on this roster, it's a fullback, and that's really where you'd probably be able to attack them. I mentioned Santos on the left, Smith probably on the right. That'll probably be which will be an interesting matchup for Miami and Orlando this year, because both teams will really like that route one, attacking you straight at you, and then both teams will probably try and use that width play to in the case of Miami, to try and get behind them. In the case of Orlando, to really have those one-on-one battles. Interesting style for them. Obviously, CONCACAF Champions League for the first time. That'll be a goal of Miami's this year. Miami and Orlando were neck and neck in the standings last year, but two very different approaches to this offseason in terms of Orlando trying to sort of like shuffle the deck a little with who they have. Miami deciding of a more holistic approach of just a couple of identification spots that they wanted to go with, and then you add a Joseph to your attack. You add a Stefanelli to your attack. You add a Christoph and a Negri to your defense. Just those little targeted areas. Which approach do you like better? Is there one that you think might serve one team better than the other?
Well, for one, I think the fans like, rebuilds like Orlando, where they can see tangible, influx of players coming in and big time players from South America. But I think Inter Miami needed to do what they needed to do with, that holistic approach, just adding on to what they already have. I know it's not as flashy as them signing 10 straight players like they did last offseason, but it's what they needed. And I want to touch on Martin Ojeda and Franco Negri. They're ex-teammates at Godoy Cruz, yep. I believe. So those derbies are going to be pretty interesting to see, especially when they line up against each other with Negri.
And they'll go head-to-head, right? Because that was the left side of Godoy Cruz. That was the left, yeah.
Yeah, so extra added emotions with the derbies this year. So it'll be interesting to see.
Let's talk about Atlanta as well. Obviously, the big news: Joseph coming to Inter Miami. They will their club legend leaves for South Florida. they try and replace him, and just with the signing of George, I'm going to butcher this name because it's a Greek international striker from Celtic, Georgios Giacomakis from Celtic. He comes in. They still have Derek Etienne Jr. They still have Araujo, Thiago in that number 10 role. So a lot of the same from Atlanta, but also they kind of went at it similar to Inter Miami, and the fact that they tried to target. Clearly, they're a little bit weaker and they're number 9. Emerson Hinman's contract was bought out. Franco Ibarra went to Sao Paulo in Brazil. 39-year-old Brad Guzan, who coming off an Achilles tear. How's he going to be? So they definitely have some question marks. I'd say that those question marks are probably in the midfield. Who's going to fill that number 8 role for them? Who's going to fill that number 6 role for them? And probably for Atlanta, this is going to be a bit of a growing pain year. That not to say that they're going to be a bad team, but they'll probably find themselves similar to probably, I would say, in that the lower side of that Eastern Conference playoff battle. They probably could get in, but I'd say that they're looking at sort of that 9, 10, 11 seed for them this year, and maybe 1 year away from getting things out. The problem when you make some of the moves that Atlanta has made is sometimes those high pressure, high level moves, when they don't work out, they handcuff you for 2-3 years in terms of a rebuild. They're sort of seeing the final iteration of that. And so within the next 1 or 2 years, they're going to get out from some of these contracts that they've needed to, Hinman being one of them, Ibarra being another one, Joseph, you would argue that they wanted to move on from. It wasn't working out there. So they're trying to really reset their cap situation in a year that might be a little bit longer for them than their fans would be accustomed to with a team of that pedigree.
Yeah, and then Miami went through that, a couple like last off season and 2021, where they just really wanted to get rid of some contracts, but Matribi and Pizarro and all of that stuff. So it's important to get the second rebuild done well. Like Miami's like you said, Miami was able to do it pretty well. Like they're everyone, like last season, everyone had them finishing bottom, but they were able to defy the odds and continue to build on that. So with Atlanta losing Joseph, like you mentioned, who's going to play that 6th role? I think Santiago Sosa can do that, but he's more of he's always injured, so I don't know if they can rely on him heavily. They got rid of Emerson Hyndman, so yeah, they're in rebuild mode, but they still have some really good players. Thiago Almada, or Luis Araujo, not Araujo. He's Brazilian, so I think there's a slight difference. I always get them confused with Ronald Araujo from Barcelona, and it's all the same, but not really. So Araujo is there, Almada, Derek Etienne. They've got a lot of good attacking talent. Andrew Gutman as a fullback. They recently signed a new center back. I forgot his name, but they got rid of Alan Franco, so they had to sign a new center back. I'll get his name right now, actually. But yeah, they're in full rebuild mode, and Garth Lagerwey, coming in and he knows what he's doing. Him and Chris Anderson. That's the name. Luis Ibrahim from Peru national team. Yeah, they just signed him, so they have him and Juan Prata, and yeah, so Atlanta are rebuilding, and Garth Lagerwey is there, and so him, Chris Henderson, what they like to do. So I think Atlanta's rebuild will be kind of similar to what Miami are doing. Buying players that aren't superstars but can get you to the top as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes, and I'm intrigued to see how they get along.
Finally, we'll just wrap out the Southeast with Charlotte, who basically returned their entire team. They only made a couple of moves in the offseason. Obviously, the terrible, tragic death of Anton Walks in January, a boating accident here in South Florida, will weigh on the minds of everybody in MLS for not only this season but for a long time. They'll have to somehow. I have no idea how you figure that out. And just your heart absolutely breaks for them, and prayers and thoughts for the whole Charlotte FC family, their fans, as they figure figure out what is sure to be a very somber season for them. The moves that they did make, I do like the striker that they brought in, Enzo Copetti, who, if you did watch, I would recommend to our the Heron Outlet audience, start checking out the Argentinian league, because a lot of the future of MLS is getting sort of a breeding ground in Argentina right now. Enzo Copetti was one of the better goal scorers in Argentina last year. He comes in to be the number 9. Swiderski moves back into that 10 slot. And that'll be really well. They signed Ashley Westwood too from Burnley, which was an interesting move. I don't know if Westwood will probably start at center back for them. I'd imagine he's a third center back for them. But basically, other than that, it is the same Charlotte. So they're sort of banking on the fact that they were close but no cigar last year, and if they find some more cohesion and another year of running this back, that they might be able to have better results in 2023. It's worked for teams in the past. We've seen teams like the Houston Dynamo do this very effectively. San Jose Earthquakes made a great playoff run. RSL a couple of years ago made a great playoff run. And you think of these, I don't know if you call them small market teams, because I wouldn't say that Houston or Charlotte or San Jose are necessarily small market, but the smaller budget teams that find their way have effectively done so with keeping guys around for multiple years. And this is now Charlotte being their attempt at it. I don't think that this is going to be a team that's competing for an Eastern Conference championship, but I do think that this is going to be a possibly a playoff team, and if they are a playoff team, an annoying out if they wind up being one.
Yeah, and I think Charlotte, like you said, they're going to be dealing with the loss of Anton Walks, but I still think they made some really good roster moves, like you said, Enzo Copetti. To your point about the Argentinian League, if you guys want to watch it, Paramount Plus, it's like $6 a month, and it's a steal. You get the Argentine League, Brazil Serie A, which I watch a lot. It's super fun. A bunch of leagues, you get the Champions League, you get Serie A in Italy. Just still, if you're not necessarily a Premier League fan, which it's another conversation for another day. I'm sure people are a little disillusioned by the transfer fees and everything, but you can watch the Brazilian Serie A, Argentine League, Italian Serie A, Champions League. And so anyway, Paramount Plus is great. This is not like an advertisement. They didn't pay us to say this, but it's still fun. But Charlotte, they should be good this year. They were decent last season. They just needed to build on what they had. Capetti is good. They're going to be an interesting team. I know they always gave Miami difficult games. They beat them. I think they beat Miami once, and then Miami beat them once at home at Drive Pink. So, let's see how that goes, and I'm intrigued to see how they get along as the season continues.
Yeah, I think that they'll be one of those interesting case studies that if you can pull points from them, then that's going to be a big boost for you and your attempt to get up the ladder in the Eastern Conference standings this year. Again, Inter Miami also has the addition of the Leagues Cup. We're going to talk about that because Phil has said that they're focusing on it this year, and Atlanta will be there with Cruz Azul for Inter Miami in their group stage in July. Obviously, the Open Cup, we've seen Orlando. That was their ticket into CONCACAF Champions League, and if you got to see the Seattle Sounders compete in the Club World Cup, that was for the first MLS team to compete in a Club World Cup. That was very exciting and a lot of fun to see them. And they obviously didn't make it past their opponent, their first round opponent, to get to Real Madrid, but it would have been fun. But that's the way, that's the path that a lot of teams are seeing now. If you can focus on the Open Cup, if you can focus on now the Leagues Cup offers another chance, and Phil has said all along, this team wants to be in the top 4 of the Eastern Conference this year and host a home playoff game for the very first time. We're going to break down some more Eastern Conference teams as we get closer to opening day. We'll touch on Montreal, Philadelphia, New York City as we get closer to those games, Inter Miami's first opponents. and who they'll be seeing this year, but wanted to really focus on the rivals as we have sort of this nice, calm lull period in the preseason as everybody is sort of getting their scrimmages in this week with Columbus and Montreal in town. Alex, always great talking to you. Make sure you follow us on our Twitter channel, on our Instagram channel, subscribe on YouTube, rate, review, tell your friends, and always subscribe to our brand new Substack. You can get all the latest scouting reports. Alex has done a great job with all of the scouting reports of the new additions for Inter Miami. You'll get stories on how preseason is going, match recaps, and more, all on our Inter Miami, the Heron Outlet Substack. That is the Heron Outlet Substack. Subscribe today. She is Alex Winley, for our producer Andres, and for Austin Robillard. Austin, we'll see you soon. I am Ian Hest. This has been the Heron Outlet, and we'll see you back here next week.